On the 28th of October 2015, a young Dutch medical student named Sophia disappeared while on a safari in Uganda's Murchison Falls National Park. She had just gone to use the restroom, like she usually did, and she never came back. Weird things were found afterward: an empty bottle by the riverbank, torn clothing, and her shoes up high in a tree, that make you wonder what actually happened that night. This video is going to try to shed some light on this mysterious disappearance that still hasn't been solved. Hey everyone, welcome to my channel, Detective Michael. So, tell me, when was the last time you went to a zoo? And, how do you feel about places like that in general? But for now, let's dive into the story. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and let's get started. Amsterdam is this bright, free-spirited city with such a unique vibe. Tourists love its picturesque canals, narrow little houses, and tons of museums like the Van Gogh Museum and the Rijksmuseum. You can take a boat ride along the canals, check out the flower market, or just soak in the cafe culture and nightlife. Amsterdam's this mix of history, art, and modern freedom. Honestly, it's beautiful, quirky, and totally vibrant. And for Sophia, this city was home. Born on the 7th of December 1993, she grew up as the eldest child and the only daughter in her family, alongside two younger brothers. Raised in Amsterdam, Sophia was ambitious, smart, and endlessly curious. She excelled in school, earning an international bachelor's degree with a double scientific focus in 2012. For a while, she dreamed of being on stage, taking classes in children's theatre with hopes of becoming an actress. But as she grew older, her passions evolved, and she discovered a deeper calling in medicine. She aced all the entrance exams and got into the University of Amsterdam, where she successfully completed her bachelor's degree with honours in 2015. Instead of jumping straight into a master's program, the next step toward becoming a doctor, Sophia decided to take a year off. She quickly realised that taking a break right after graduation would, unfortunately, make finding a job a lot harder. So, the plan was actually pretty simple. Now that she had her bachelor's, Sophia wanted to take a year off and just do whatever she wanted before heading back home to finish her master's. And that's exactly what she did. Practical but adventurous, she wanted to gain real-world experience before settling down. Ever since she was a kid, Sophia was multi-talented and super hard-working. She always seemed busy, probably because she often juggled more than 2 jobs while also volunteering at a local senior centre. She was known as social, cheerful, and, as people often say in stories like this, she could literally light up a room when she walked in. And yeah, I know this might sound kinda cliché, but that's exactly how her friends described her. To give you a better sense of who she was, Sophia loved writing, drawing, playing the piano, and dancing. When it came to sports, she was into basketball and rowing. By 2015, it was clear that Sophia's ambitions were totally set. She wanted to become a doctor, specialising in tropical medicine. So when she got offered an internship at Lubaga Hospital in Kampala, Uganda, she literally jumped at the chance. Lubaga Hospital is right in the heart of Uganda's capital, Kampala. We'll talk a bit more about it later, but it's actually one of the oldest hospitals in the country, serving part of the city's 1.8 million residents. Optimistic and fearless, Sophia even started learning the local language, Luganda, because she was determined not just to work in the hospital, but to actually connect with the local people. So, at only 21 years old, she set off, ready to immerse herself in a new culture and make the most of this unique opportunity. It was the start of a brand new chapter, full of growth, discovery, and service. But tragically, this so-called new chapter would turn out to be her last. Sophia arrived in Uganda on the 31st of August 2015, wide-eyed, backpack on her shoulders, and ready for an internship that was supposed to change her life forever. She was eager to dive into both medicine and Ugandan life. Through ASIC, she stayed in a student house in Kampala, where both Dutch volunteers and Ugandan students lived. Was it interesting? Absolutely. Quiet? Not even close. In many of her messages back home, Sophia often wrote that it was never peaceful there, but for someone who seemed to thrive on activity, that chaos was kind of her energy source. Days turned into weeks, and she quickly bonded with her housemates, colleagues, and even the city itself. By mid-October, her mom, Maria, flew in from Amsterdam for a short visit. By that time, Maria was wrapping up her career in film production and journalism, and this was the perfect chance to spend time with her daughter. The big reunion on October 14 was full of smiles and hugs. And of course, it also reassured Maria that Sophia wasn't just safe, but thriving. Sophia threw herself into her work at the hospital, loving both the patients and her responsibilities. Staff noted that she was one of the best students they had ever had. She even started picking up bits of Uganda so she could joke with patients and staff alike. Over the next few weeks, her routine settled into something pretty lively. Hospital work, trips to the markets and nightclubs, long walks around the city, and, of course, trying all the local foods. Some she loved, some not so much. But honestly, you can't blame her. It was obvious that she was genuinely thrilled to be in Uganda and had found real purpose in her time there. And as the 8-week internship slowly came to an end, Sophia admitted that she wasn't quite ready to head back home. Tropical medicine wasn't just an idea for her anymore, it had literally become her calling. On the 22nd of October 2015, her internship officially wrapped up, and after the goodbyes, Sophia could finally grab her reward. And, as you probably guessed, that reward was a trip with friends. So, Sophia, along with 2 Dutch friends she met during her internship and a hired driver guide named Michael, set off to really explore Uganda. Savannas, waterfalls, and dozens of small towns. This was supposed to be 10 amazing days of freedom before they flew back home in November. And with that dream in mind, what could possibly go wrong? At first, nothing. The group headed north to Kidepo Valley National Park, known for its harsh, remote, and breathtaking wilderness. Then, around October 26, they checked into a poker safari lodge, where the assistant caretaker, Stephen, remembered that they stayed in 2 separate cottages. That evening, their mood was super high, maybe even a little too high, because later the neighbours politely asked them to keep it down a bit. But Sophia went a step further, apologising to all the neighbours, and that's when one of them noticed she was acting a bit unusual, even seeming vulnerable, according to the witness. Later that night, still before dawn on October 27, the trip took a pretty strange turn. Around 4 a.m, everyone in the camp suddenly woke up to some pretty aggressive banging. One of the rangers on duty went out to check what was happening, and that's when he saw Sophia up on an elevated platform hitting several informational panels. For anyone who's not familiar, these are big metal stands you usually see at tourist sites with information in multiple languages. When I first read this, I was like, wait, what? 2? Even more worrying, it looked like Sophia was trying to set fire to the grass nearby, which was extremely dangerous and totally out of character for her. This is where the first of many unexpected twists begins, and it's worth noting that Sophia actually had bipolar tendencies, although she insisted she never suffered from depression and only experienced manic episodes. In fact, she was mostly unipolar. According to her family, Sophia only experienced mania after being in a heightened state of activity for a long time, especially when she didn't have time to slow down or process what was happening. And considering she had been in a new country for 8 weeks, that actually makes sense. Unfortunately, some reports claim Sophia was acting crazy at that moment, but a more accurate way to say it is that she was experiencing a manic episode, triggered by overstimulation and emotional overload. Regardless, Sophia was clearly distressed no matter the circumstances. All her friends were worried. One passerby noted that she seemed extremely vulnerable at that point, and the caretaker even insisted that Michael immediately stop the tour and take her to a hospital. Apparently, Michael even agreed at the time. Even hours after the incident, Sophia still appeared unstable. At one point, she even tried to jump out of a moving van. Concerned for her safety, the group left Kidepo and arrived in Gulu on October 27, skipping one planned stop to get there faster. By then, the simple assumption was clear. Sophia urgently needed help. Worried about the situation, Sophia's friends decided to call her mom, Maria, at 6:30 p.m. on October 28, letting her know they planned to bring Sophia back to Kampala the next day and take her to a hospital. A smart, safe decision. It seemed like the choice had finally been made, but it it wasn't. Despite all advice and common sense, Michael, the group's guide, decided not to return the vehicle. Instead, he drove west, heading toward Murchison Falls. It's a massive, wild place, absolutely breathtaking if you're in a good state of mind. The Nile cuts through deep gorges, savannas stretch to the horizon, and the surrounding wilderness is just stunning. So why did the group even go, given Sophia's condition? Maybe they were hoping to salvage the trip. Maybe Sophia seemed calmer. Or maybe Michael just didn't want to cancel the tour and lose money. Whatever the reason, by late evening on October 28th, they were deep inside Murchison Falls National Park, far from the capital. Tragically, this would be the last day anyone saw Sophia. Once they arrived at the park, the group did what visitors usually do. They went on a Nile river float. It was the perfect moment to take in all the surrounding wildlife. Hippos and crocodiles in the water, elephants and giraffes on the banks. After all the chaos in Kidepo, it was exactly the kind of calm the group needed. According to all accounts, Sophia seemed calm during the float. Maybe the weird episode had passed, or maybe she was just tired. As the day shifted into evening, the group decided to stay at the Student Education Centre, basically a few simple dorm-style huts inside the park. Sure, they were near a rural road, but otherwise, it was just nothing, out in the middle of nowhere. Around 6 p.m, about 45 minutes before sunset, Sophia told the others she was going to the restroom, which was only a few minutes' walk away. Meanwhile, her friends decided to stay at the dorms, unpacking and expecting her back soon. Sophia said she'd be right back and walked out the front door. That was the last time her friends saw her. She never came back. At first, there was no panic. After all, it's just a restroom, and everyone wants a little privacy. But as the sun started to set, worry began creeping in. When they approached the restroom block and called her name, it wasn't just quiet, there was nothing there. Completely empty. That moment changed everything. Within 15 minutes, all of Sophia's friends and the driver were scouring the area for her. They were desperately calling the park rangers for help. But no matter how loud they shouted or how carefully they searched, Sophia had vanished. It was like she had disappeared into thin air. The park rangers quickly mobilized, combing the bushes around the center and gradually expanding the search outward. The problem? Darkness. On moonless nights, Murchison Falls is pitch black, an absolute ink blot. In the middle of the night, you can see nothing, and rangers have to rely more on sound than sight. Despite all efforts, the first night of searching turned up nothing. At daybreak, the operation widened. Police joined the rangers, dozens of teams moving on foot along trails through thick brush and along the riverbank. And the river itself was another massive threat to Sophia's safety. She wasn't just up against the wilderness, the elements, or even potentially other people. The river could carry her hundreds of miles downstream, not to mention the fast rapids and crocodiles waiting in the waters. Regarding the school, or rather the restroom Sophia had used, the block was on the edge of the area, which made it super easy for her, or maybe for someone else, to slip in and out unnoticed. That same day, officers found the first clue. Local rangers discovered an empty plastic bottle by the Nile, later confirmed to belong to Sophia. Of course, this suggested she might have made it to the water. But why? And where did she go after that? By sunset, the operation had turned into one of the biggest search and rescue efforts the park had ever seen. Teams were combing the land, patrolling by boat along the river, flying in helicopters, and using specially trained dogs, all working around the clock to find her. Meanwhile, back in Kampala, Sophia's mom dropped everything and headed straight to her daughter. She arrived at the park on October 30, walked into the command tent, and stepped right into the center of her nightmare. And soon after she arrived, even stranger clues appeared. Near the bottle, searchers found torn pieces of colorful fabric, not just on the ground, but also tied to branches. It turned out these were parts of Sophia's clothing. Nearby, about 16 feet up in a tree, more fragments were discovered, this time pieces of her underwear and pants, seemingly tied to the branches. Right there, they also found one of her shoes, neatly placed, dry and clean. Next to it was an empty little bag, and her other shoe. Now, this might sound obvious, But all of this was starting to look extremely suspicious. When I first heard about the bottle, I thought maybe she had just gone down to the river and dropped it by accident. But when clothing started showing up scattered around the area, and some pieces were in seriously hard to reach spots, it didn't just seem strange, it seemed deliberate. It literally looked staged, almost theatrical, and it left everyone working on the case baffled. Even stranger, and more unsettling, was the fact that this area had already been searched the previous night, and suddenly new items started appearing. At this point, there were only two possibilities. Either the items had been missed during the first search, or someone had placed them there later. For the family, it was a kind of dark, cruel irony that did nothing to ease the pain in an already terrifying situation. As for the scene itself, it gave no useful clues, no blood, no drag marks, no signs of wildlife, and even if you imagine she was disoriented and took off her clothes before entering the water, how do you explain her shoes and clothing ending up 5 meters up in a tree? These clues pushed the search into overdrive. On November 4, the 7th day after her disappearance, a specialized Dutch team arrived with drones and advanced equipment. Meanwhile, forensic experts collected all the clothing found in the bushes. Later testing confirmed that the items contained not only Sophia's DNA, but also DNA from an unknown person, and the most alarming part? That unknown DNA was found on her underwear. This was a major hint, not just of possible outside involvement, but maybe even a motive. But without a DNA match, it hit a dead end again. No body, no witnesses, no confirmed trace beyond the bottle or clothing. This case remained a mystery no one could solve. At first, local and international media were all over Sophia's disappearance. But interest faded, and within a few weeks, it had basically disappeared. Not surprising. With tourism at stake, local authorities leaned toward the story of a tragic accident. They claimed Sophia either fell into the Nile or was attacked by a crocodile or hippo, basically an unfortunate incident during a mental health crisis. Of course, her family firmly rejected that. Too many pieces didn't add up, and honestly, I think they were right. Her clothing was scattered across the area, and her underwear was tied up 5 meters in a tree. Really? That doesn't sound like a crocodile attack. And if these animals were that clever, we'd all be in big trouble. Full of pain, despair, and now anger, Maria stayed in Uganda for several weeks. She did everything she could, coordinating with the police, organizing private searches, talking to anyone who might know anything about Sophia. And even after returning to the Netherlands, Maria promised that the search for her daughter would never end. Unfortunately, to this day, Sophia has not been found, but her mother still believes there's hope as long as there's no definitive proof of what happened. So now, let's look at the different theories about what could have happened. Everything from accidents to human trafficking. Some are plausible, others not so much. Starting with the innocent version, the first official theory from the Ugandan police suggested Sophia accidentally fell into the Nile, possibly anxious or disoriented. At first glance, that sounds plausible, especially given how rough the river can be. But there are serious problems with this idea. For one, there were no visible signs along the riverbank, no blood, no drag marks in the dirt, nothing. And if it had been a crocodile or hippo attack, those creatures usually leave plenty of evidence. Stuff like torn clothing, bite marks, disturbed soil. Now, if Sophia had just drowned, you'd expect her body, or at least some clothing, to eventually float downstream, especially since the river empties into a lake, not the ocean. But despite that, nothing appeared, no trace. What really blows this theory apart is the clothing. Sophia's shoes and shorts were found far from the water, dry, and neatly removed, some even high up in a tree. Those clues look deliberately staged, almost sloppy, like someone trying to fake a scene. Something you'd expect from a criminal thriller, but definitely not from the Nile. Moving on to theory number 2. Maybe a lion or leopard took her? Murchison Falls is home to big cats, and a lone person at night is certainly vulnerable. On paper, that seems plausible, but in practice, again, no. An attack like that usually leaves long trails of blood, drag marks, paw prints, even remains none of which were found by the dozens of search teams, including experienced trackers. Obviously, The pattern of the clothing didn't match. Predators, if we're talking about animals, don't strip their prey, and they certainly don't hang shoes in trees. Park staff considered this scenario for a while, but ultimately called it unlikely based on the facts. And of course, the items neatly tied to branches clearly point to human hands, not animal behavior. Theory 3. Could Sophia have experienced a sudden mental breakdown or a manic episode? Sure, her manic behavior earlier that morning could have been a warning sign. Interestingly, it reminds me of the case of Alice Lamb, who, during a manic episode, apparently decided to swim in a rainwater reservoir. Based on that, it's plausible Sophia might have wanted to swim in the Nile. Technically, in a manic state, she could have stripped off her clothes, climbed a tree, and then tried to make her way into the river, suddenly losing strength against the current. And if she really tried to set the grass on fire the day before, that shows her judgment was genuinely in a dangerous zone. But I also want to point out, climbing down a tree naked and barefoot is a recipe for disaster. That would almost certainly result in fractures and leave blood trails. The tree was inspected and no blood was found. I also genuinely don't believe Sophia intended to end her life. She was never depressed, always positive, and full of opportunities. When Alice Lamb had her manic episode, she hid in an elevator after sensing a threat. Maybe Sophia felt the same. So, one possibility. After going to the toilet, Sophia felt threatened, got scared, ran, climbed a tree, and removed her clothes, either because of the heat or to leave a trace. But what happened next? Nobody knows. And honestly, I still find this theory a bit of a stretch. Next, Theory 4. Negligence or criminal action by the guide. Honestly, I consider this version entirely plausible. You cannot look at this case without examining Michael, the driver, and for very good reasons. Michael wasn't just the last person responsible for Sophia's safety. He made several poor decisions while she was vulnerable. This includes the trip to Murchison Falls, despite direct advice not to go, booking minimalist accommodations with zero security, failing to provide proper supervision that evening despite her condition, and one big thing, he wasn't even a licensed guide. At the very least, that's negligence, creating the perfect conditions for her disappearance. But did it go further? There are several inconsistencies. For example, when the Kadipo's supervisor, Nadru, called Michael after learning Sophia was missing, Michael initially claimed they hadn't even gone to Murchison Falls. So why say that? Panic? Or something far darker? On top of that, attention must be paid to the unknown DNA found on Sophia's clothing. The gender hasn't been publicly confirmed, but if it's male DNA and matches Michael's well, that's a completely different story. Though, likely, he has already been tested and ruled out. And of course, that's a whole story in itself. Personally, I think the clothing was deliberately left to confuse investigators. Locals also pointed out that an unlicensed operator might have tried to avoid trouble with the police, and for obvious reasons. So, where does this theory lead us? There's a strong argument for negligence, a few red flags, and a lot of speculation, but until we have transparent forensic analysis and a consistent timeline of events, we're left in the dark. And finally, there's the theory most of us are probably thinking about, that Sophia was abducted by an unknown outsider. Unfortunately, we can't rule out the simplest and darkest possibility, that someone was there waiting to take her. Looking again at the map, the centre was cheap, open, and completely unfenced. In fact, park rangers, staff, and other visitors could often move through the area without warning or permission. So, if Sophia went to the toilet and encountered the wrong person, she would have been vulnerable. And while no screams were reported, she could have been neutralized silently. The unknown DNA on her clothing also suggests she came into contact with someone. Since there's no indication she was intimate with anyone prior to her disappearance, we can only speculate that the DNA on her underwear points to the darkest possibilities. But sadly, without a body, we don't know what happened. That doesn't stop many people from speculating and even believing that she might have been kidnapped, abused, killed, held for ransom, or even trafficked. Unfortunately, many of the facts used to support different theories can be interpreted in multiple ways, meaning these theories often overlap. So whether it was a moment of confusion, an act of nature, guide negligence, or a predator lurking in the shadows, every fact leads to a different possible outcome. Many people following this story lean toward foul play. Given the wealth of evidence, the guide's decisions, gaps in the group's timeline, and all the other inconsistencies, it certainly points to outside involvement. Ultimately, all the theories boil down to two possibilities. Sophia is somewhere alive, unseen, and unnoticed, or, tragically, she is dead. But until new evidence emerges, or existing evidence is solved, we remain in the unknown. Just 2 months ago, in July 2025, Sophia's case returned to court. The tour guide, Michael, appears to be in serious trouble, as it turns out he wasn't licensed to supervise Sophia and her group, and questions remain about his negligence on the day she vanished. It's hard to say where this will lead, so for now, we just wait. Honestly, it's a painful conclusion, but I believe Sophia was likely abducted by someone who was waiting for her. The clues are pretty clear if you look closely. I don't think this was self-inflicted, and it certainly wasn't wild animals. Someone, probably another person, had to intervene that night. Was it her driver, an opportunistic outsider, or perhaps a dark collusion between the two? Sadly, we may never know, but I'm almost certain another party was responsible. The theory of abduction or even murder is further complicated by the broader context. Many Western governments advise against travelling to Uganda, which, unfortunately, has its share of violence, murders, and sexual crimes. It's a hard truth that cannot be ignored. What do you think happened to Sophia? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And just a reminder, please be respectful in your replies. I'll probably wrap it up here, friends. Thank you for being with me, your Detective Mike. Until next time.